So today we talked about chipping, and we talked about how to hit, or how two different clubs will create two different shots, right? So the actual technique of the shot was ball in the middle of our stance, and this is going to allow us to have a slightly flatter angle of attack. This will help us hit the ball off of some tight lies. It'll also make it a lot harder for us to hit the ball really heavy or to not hit the ground at all and have it skip across the green. We talked about how it's much more simple to hit a shot with no wrist action going back and no wrist action going through. We talked about how the way you can measure that is by looking at where the club face is pointing during your follow through. And it's also important to remember that when we're getting to this point, we're allowed to rotate our torso. We don't have to keep that dead stable. In fact, it's almost impossible to get the club head to the right spot unless you let your upper body turn a little bit. All right. We talked about how the most common thing that your average amateur golfer does incorrectly on chip shots is that they use wrist both going back and going through. And the reason that creates inconsistency is because the club head does not always end up in the same position relative to the hands at impact. All right, because we have an extra moving part with the club head and our wrists. So sometimes the club head might end up well behind our hands, sometimes it might end up well in front of our hands, which is significantly worse. Now you can hit acceptable shots either way, but it's a lot harder to be consistent doing it with either of those ways. We talked about how our target is going to be about 5 feet on the green, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, and how you can, using the same motion with maybe even a little bit less effort, make the ball go significantly further just by changing the club out. Swapping a higher lofted club out for a lower lofted club, as we saw with the dispersion that we created, was massively different and a lot easier, and that's why if we can help it, we want to use less loft to a certain extent. We don't want to go up to a 4-iron. All right, I think that's the end of it.
Thank you. That's great.
Thank you.
That's great.
That was really good.